Hello, and welcome to today's webinar, Explore Your Giving Potential to Effect Change. I'm Althea Georgantis, Associate Director of Programs at Exponent Philanthropy, the country's largest association of funders and the only one dedicated to serving foundations with few or no staff, philanthropic families, and individual donors. Some announcements about upcoming programs we have coming up. On February 15th, we have a briefing on what lean funders should expect from Congress in 2024 and the importance of engaging in the United Philanthropy Forum's Foundations on the Hill and other federal policy advocacy this year. Later this spring, we have the On-Ramp to Catalytic Philanthropy, a 10-week hands-on experiential program that provides training, community, and support to venture out into your community, listen deeply, and nurture relationships. And finally, please save the date for our 2024 annual conference being held in Austin, Texas, November 14 to 16. We also invite you to be a part of creating this conference. You can submit session proposals now, or you can apply to review proposals. Those are all due on February 9th. So please do consider contributing to the conference as well as attending. You can find more out about all of our upcoming programs on our website, exponentphilanthropy.org. A quick overview of how we'll be using Zoom today. A reminder, you can always adjust your listening options using the audio settings button. And then I want to highlight the chat function. It's important because it's how we will receive all of your questions today. Our speakers will be saving questions for a Q&A period at the end of the presentation, but please do enter your question in at any time, just as they come up. I also want to mention that we are using automatically generated closed captions. You can view or hide them by clicking the CC button in your controls. And now I will introduce today's speakers. Joining from Foundation Source is Tanya Waite. Tanya supports corporate and family foundations of varying complexities, guiding their board members, staff, and advisors through all aspects of philanthropy and Foundation Source's service offerings. Cameron Marsh is a senior analyst for Nucleus Research, a global provider of ROI-focused technology research and advisory services. And then moderating our conversation today is Alexis Fish, who is also joining us from our partner Foundation Source. With that, I will pass it over to Alexis to get us started. Alexis, welcome.
Thank you so much for having us today. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And so hopefully everybody right now is seeing a PowerPoint. Perfect. Well, thank you again, everybody, for being here. Thank you, Althea and Exponent, for having us. And as Althea mentioned, we welcome your questions, and please put them in the Q&A box. If we don't have time to get to them today, we'll make sure to follow up with them afterwards. So in today's session, what we are going to talk through are really these tips for funders to be able to maximize and affect their change. Right? Tips for making 2024 successful, how to enable that philanthropic wealth transfer. Those are those tough questions too to ask your vendor before you buy. As Althea mentioned, I'm Cameron Marsh, who's a senior analyst at Nucleus Research, and our very own Tanya Fuente, who's Director of Client Services here at Foundation Source. Thank you both for being here with us. We're going to kick off today with you, Cameron. We're going to start off really digging into the Nucleus study that you and your team worked on.
Awesome. Thank you, Alexis. First, I just want to take a quick second and give some context about the foundation that we worked with for this study. So they are a US-based private foundation focused on philanthropy. They were founded in the latter half of 2021 and now have an endowment of approximately 25 million. Their focuses are on healthcare for hereditary diseases, as well as education for health, science, and technology. Currently, this foundation only has one full-time employee, and they have 5 board members. So now let's just talk about and go over the challenges that they were facing that led them to coming to the conclusion that they needed a solution like Foundation Source. The research was on a growing foundation that encountered several operational challenges as they scaled their efforts in grant making. Initially, the foundation utilized Google Suite to manage its operations, which, while efficient for startups, soon revealed its limitations under the complex demands of a growing nonprofit. We observed that the foundation's access to tools that could organize and streamline documents and communication was pretty limited. And as the volume of their work increased, so did the need for multi-vendor tracking, which became a critical aspect of their operations. One of the most significant bottlenecks was the grant approval process. Not only was it cumbersome and time consuming, but it also lacked the agility required for quick decision making. This inefficiency became particularly important when it came time to present materials for board meetings or conduct voting processes. In addition, the foundation struggled with things like inefficient donation tracking, applicant management, and impact reporting, which, as I'm sure everyone here knows, are pretty key functionalities for any nonprofit aiming to make a significant impact. And the absence of these tools led to missed opportunities, elevated compliance risks, and strained engagement with both partners and stakeholders. And lastly, as newcomers to the philanthropic space, the foundation also faced the challenge of navigating all this complexity without any seasoned guidance. They lacked the industry-specific best practices that could help them scale their efforts effectively. So as we transition to the next phase of our study, let's focus on the critical requirements that the foundation needed and what specifically they were looking for in a new grant management system. First was the need for a user-friendly interface. High usability, we found, is a pretty significant driver of user adoption. And this foundation understood that to maximize the productivity of their team, the new system needed to be intuitive, easy to navigate, especially since their board members had pretty various experience with technology and they were from multiple generations. The second requirement was that the foundation needed a system that could consolidate data from various sources, providing greater visibility into operations. This level of transparency was not just about having access to information, but also being able to see the connections and kind of draw the dots and those insights that were gathered to really guide those strategic decisions. And lastly, and actually the most important thing that one employee emphasized was that the importance of automation. By reducing manual tasks, the foundation aimed to increase efficiency, and removing all of that time-consuming and administrative work really allowed their team to focus more on the higher value activities such as strategic planning or stakeholder engagement. Now, just to quickly summarize the benefits before we dive a bit deeper into them here in a minute, but the top 5 benefits that the foundation saw after partnering with Foundation Source were improved board member productivity, increased grant making volume, reduced third-party spending, reduced administrative work, and increased compliance assurance. First, we found that board member productivity improved by approximately 25%. This increase was largely due to a more efficient way of presenting materials and streamlining various voting processes, and also reviewing grant applications through the Impactfully app. These enhancements allowed board members to reallocate their time to those more strategic initiatives, which led to a more effective governance and a stronger fulfillment to the foundation's philanthropic goals. Next was a 33% efficiency improvement in the grant approval process. Prior to the implementation of Foundation Source, the approval process had some inefficient communication and manual document handling. Now, with a more streamlined process, the organization has been able to scale its operations and manage a higher volume of grants annually without a corresponding increase in staff. Now, this has optimized their operational costs and enhanced their strategic grant allocation, which increases the foundation's philanthropic reach. The next benefit is reduced third-party spending. Before Foundation Source, considerable expenses were tied to third-party report generation and other administrative services. Now, the new software platform, combined with a team of industry experts, enabled the foundation to consolidate these critical functions, which reduce their overall spending and improve their efficiency. The last benefit that's really important to call out is increased compliance assurance. Having a partner like Foundation Source and their team assisted the foundation with auditing of things like 990 PFs and verification of recipient organizations' 501c3 status, and provided that invaluable peace of mind. This collaboration ensured that all of the foundation's operations are up to code, eliminating potential gridlocks and allows the staff to concentrate more on those strategic objectives with greater confidence.
Thank you, Cameron, for sharing your work. It's really wonderful that the foundations that you interviewed were able to find so much value in a partner vendor, especially really that focus on how the gap between services and technology can affect those realized benefits. So the only question that I'm left with now really is the how. And that's what we're going to dive into next. So here at Foundation Source, we put out an annual report on private philanthropy. Our report reflecting back on 2023 shows that philanthropic giving is up despite headwinds. Right? It doesn't show any signs of slowing down. So when we say that giving is up, we mean not only in dollar amount, but in the volume of grants as well. So now we're going to go ahead and turn our attention over to how effective philanthropists can affect change. So Tanya, thank you for being here with us. Now, one of the benefits that Cameron told us about in the study was the increase in effectiveness. Can you tell us about your role at Foundation Source and the ways that foundations have benefited by working with a third-party partner?
Sure. Thank you for having me here. So I serve as one of our leaders in our client services department, assisting in various operational initiatives. I also serve as a relationship manager to a portfolio of clients overseeing the day-to-day operations of their foundation. This can involve addressing general compliance questions with respect to their grant making or expenses or tax matters, leveraging other subject matter experts as needed, and of course, helping them utilize our web-based platform so that they can maximize or enhance their operational efficiency. Our biggest goal here, of course, is to alleviate the administrative workload so that they can focus on the bigger aspect of their philanthropy. Generally speaking, they can benefit from working with a third-party vendor in several ways, right? Oftentimes, they can provide specialized expertise and skills that the foundation might not have in-house to help them navigate a tricky legal situation, provide technology solutions. In my personal experience, I feel that family foundations in particular really benefit from working with a third-party partner to help them communicate deadlines, perhaps a potential compliance concern, or other deliverables. And it's very helpful to have a non-biased partner being the one to deliver that information, as opposed to maybe it being perceived as a family member, one family member dictating to another family member what to do. And then some other things that come to mind of how we've been, how they can benefit, just speaking from some other personal experiences. We may remember during the pandemic, which I know we're probably all trying to forget, there was this one client that we were able to help. There was a mask shortage, right? And we were able to help them find a company to sew masks, and then they were able to grant those masks out to other charitable organizations that really needed them so they can continue their operations. And then, of course, there's other ways that we can be beneficial to them, right? A lot of them don't have staff, they don't have executive directors, so we can step in to assist with how to approach advanced grant making, international grant making, setting up scholarships, other direct charitable activities, things of that nature.
Very nice. Thank you. And along with that uptick in foundation giving, we also know that generational wealth transfer is increasing. As these older generations pass on the tradition of giving to the next generation. This kind of transition can feel unpredictable. Can you elaborate on this?
Sure. So it's understandable, right, that navigating the complexities of succession planning can feel daunting. Each generation is going to bring different values and causes that are important to them. And sometimes that can lead to challenges with aligning the traditional intentions of the founder with the new evolving priorities of that next generation. The unpredictability, of course, can also just simply stem from not knowing how to engage the next generation. And I have found, in my personal experience, that when families have a good understanding of their values and what is important to them, that can serve as a guiding star, because they will always be rooted in those same values. And kind of going back to what we were talking about before about, why it's sometimes helpful when they do have a third-party partner or advisor that they trust. We really get to know the family, we know the history, and we can help them. There's resources. A lot of times philanthropic service companies will have these resources to help them have those conversations about how to engage the next generation, how to develop a succession plan, and outline the responsibilities for those future generations. Again, just thinking of some personal experience that I've had, I recall that I was working with this family one year, and it was a mother and a father and a brother, and it was time for them to engage their children. It was 2 siblings, and they were out of college, and they weren't quite sure how to do that. So we were able to provide them with some resources we had a couple of family retreats. One of them served as an educational retreat, just kind of helping them understand what philanthropy is and how private foundations work. And then we were able to understand what causes were important to them, ways that they wanted to give back to the community. And slowly the family started with giving them, a small discretionary budget for them to be able to make grants without needing any kind of approval. And then they were able to feel comfortable adding them as officers, which then eventually led to adding them to the board. So it was this very organic, natural kind of progression and how they were able to get them involved. And again, kind of going back to what we were just talking about, that's some of the benefits of working with a third-party advisor. We can really help them, navigate that landscape.
That's very helpful to hear and very comforting, I think, as well. And you shared some stories with us. So Tanya, I know you supported hundreds of foundations. So can you tell us about some considerations that every foundation should have in mind to ask their vendor before they start working with them?
Well, we kind of have the saying here, of course, when you've seen one private foundation, you've seen one foundation. I personally, for me, when you're considering a service provider, you may want to choose one that offers the most comprehensive suite of services under one roof. The questions that you may want to consider, of course, will depend on what your need is, right? What your pain point is, what challenges you're trying to solve. And again, generally speaking, some questions that you may want to consider is, what does your onboarding process look like? What services are included? Will you have a dedicated point person when you do need support? Is that even important to you? Do you offer any kind of technology solutions? Because I think we're all looking for that these days to really streamline our processes, things of that nature. And if they do have a technology solution or a website, I would definitely ask for a demonstration of what that looks like, so you have a good understanding of what the capabilities are and the limitations. So there's some of the things that come to mind.
Wonderful. Those are so helpful. We have some questions that have come in here. So Cameron, I'm going to go ahead and start with you for the first question. And then Tanya, just to tee you up here, it looks like the second question are some tips for making 2024 successful. So Cameron, we'll go ahead and start with you. If you can talk about some trends that you might even see, especially from your research out in the market for 2024.
Yeah, absolutely. The first one that comes to mind is one thing that Tanya talked a little bit about. And it's important for me to note that I don't come from the same space as you. I cover, general, more broad tech, but it's interesting to see that it's consistent. And the first one is really, there's no one size fits all approach to technology. Like Tanya said, once you've seen one, you've seen one, right? And I think it's important to really assess where you're at and just talk to somebody who will help you get to where you want to be. In my experience, customers across really all of business tech are showing that increased desire to have a relationship, or a word that Tanya used a lot is partnership, with their technology vendor. Customers want to feel like they matter, right? And that their vendor has a vested interest in their success. Next one that came to mind is consolidation. Tanya talked about having kind of everything under one roof. Technology and businesses in general right now are getting really complex, right? And it's usually a lot easier if you have everything under one roof. Integrations are stronger, the different applications or features play more nicely together. And that generally results in a much better experience for the user.
Thank you. That's very helpful. And Tanya, if you could answer our question about tips for making 2024 a success.
Oh, well, again, every foundation is so unique. It's not a one size fits all. I would say that it really depends on the stage of life of your foundation. I would say that, if you're a newly created foundation, if you're a little bit newer to the landscape, maybe your focus this year is going to be on establishing what your mission is, what your focus is, choosing the right members, putting the right administrative structure into place. If you've been around a little bit longer, then maybe you want to start the year by reevaluating what your grant making strategy is, if any changes need to be made there. And then, of course, I think one thing that we can always all benefit from is just, starting to evaluate what, the impact that your foundation had with your past initiatives, what worked, what didn't work, and kind of let that inform, how you're going to approach 2024 and beyond.
I love that. That's such a good tip for 2024 to start that benchmarking and really think about the impact from there. We have another question that was submitted to us, and Cameron, I'll let you go ahead and start with it. But Tanya, from your experience, I'd love for you to follow up once Cameron finishes his answer. So I'll start with you, Cameron. The question is, how can I manage my new partnership with outside tech with no full-time employee? And in your research of the sector overall, have you seen different kinds of management happen? Do you have any tips from that broader point of view?
Yeah, that's a great question. From what I've seen, it really requires you to trust someone else outside of your organization, right? So whether that be, a trusted advisor that is maybe your CSM or your customer success manager, someone like Tanya, right? That they will be able to kind of help steer you in that direction and kind of leverage them and leverage their help if you don't have somebody internally that can effectively take on that role. I know that that's really one of the things that's pretty consistent across all tech right now is people are really trying to kind of do more with less, right? That's a pretty consistent, I guess, goal for a lot of folks. And I think the best way to do that is, tap someone on the shoulder who has been there before, has done that before, who does it on a day-to-day basis. Someone like Tanya, I guess, in this example. Now, for that to happen, I want to just reiterate, you got to trust them, right? I mean, everyone who has a foundation, you're passionate about it, you care about it. So it can be hard to kind of, give the reins off to someone else because you want to make sure that they're going to run that the same way that you would. So it's really about just like kind of developing that relationship with somebody who you trust to kind of do that alongside you.
Tanya, take it away.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. And I guess I'm not sure if I completely understand the question, but again, it depends on who you're partnering with, right? So a lot of times, if you don't have that staff, then you're going to potentially have that trusted advisor that can step in and help you. If you're just talking about a website platform, some sort of platform technology solution, ideally it's going to be very intuitive and very easy to navigate so that the person you're working with, your advisor, they're going to provide you with some demonstrations on how to use the system. And then it's going to be very easy to use and very straightforward. Hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah, for sure. What I think is helpful too from both of your point of views, and where I sit within the organization here at Foundation Source within the philanthropic sector, is we see this quite a lot where there's people who don't have their own staff, and they become like our liaison in terms of a foundation member. You don't have to have that whole staff because you essentially get a Tanya, right? Who literally would be that concierge to say to all the different departments, this is what's needed for compliance and this is what's needed for legal. So managing it overall tends to be, I think from my point of view, easy because I can just pick up the phone and call Tanya, which is great. So that
Absolutely.
really that one-on-one. The
Yeah.
next question we have in here is, how does what you do compare with what a community foundation can do? That is a great question. I can, or Tanya, if you want to talk a little bit about the nuances of a community foundation, or do you want to take on more of what we do? We can divide and conquer.
Well, yeah. Generally speaking, I mean, a community foundation is considered a public charity, right? So they typically will be staffed. They'll use a technology solution. They'll have a lot more local grant making. They have a lot more donors. I don't know if that's where you were
I think
heading,
so.
but
Well, so if we can ask for clarification too. The big
yeah.
thing that we also do, if you're thinking about the difference between a community foundation and some kind of provider, like what Foundation Source does, or others who are in the same sector, it's not just being a DAF sponsor. So you are going to have a private foundation and all of the controls that come along with
Correct.
that. In addition, if you are somebody who is philanthropic but does not have a private foundation, that's something that we can establish for you and make sure
Right.
that there are those compliance controls behind it. Actually, while I think of it, Tanya, and sorry if I'm putting you on the spot here, but in
Okay.
terms of compliance and what we offer for Foundation Source, is that something that you feel comfortable talking about a little bit, the
Yeah.
compliance oversight and what that looks like here?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a huge component of the services that we offer. We provide complete compliance monitoring for our foundations, and we also built that into our technology platform. I like to say that it's both. It's the advisor and the technology solution, because when you use our platform, we have what's called point of transaction compliance monitoring. So we have a lot of bells and whistles that will really protect a foundation from accidentally making a grant or, paying something that they shouldn't pay, right? And then, of course, we have all of the experts, in-house experts. There's the advisors, someone like myself that's a generalist that can provide you with guidance when it comes to anything from, what happens if I don't meet my minimum distribution requirement, or, how do I give to an individual? What are the rules around that? What are the rules around international grant making? Because there's very specific rules for all these things. So we, of course, try to provide as much guidance so they can make informed decisions. And then we also have other subject matter experts. We've got the attorneys and the philanthropic directors, that we will bring in as needed. Compliance is a big piece of it. Sometimes it's very straightforward, as we know, and then sometimes it's a little bit more nuanced. But we try to make things as simple as possible, right? We always want to get to the yes and help our clients achieve their goals, but while, of course, preventing them from making any kind of accidental taxable expenditure. That's a big piece of it.
That's a really interesting point. I appreciate the background and also the point that you made that the technology has certain stopgaps for compliance, but then there's also the human portion.
That's right.
Cameron, from your point of view, doing market research, like you said, in general, beyond just you happen to do a study that was, about Foundation Source, but in general, right, the services and technology studies that you do and that Nucleus puts out and the benchmarking. Something interesting that you brought to my attention that I wasn't aware of before is the impact that can happen and sort of that ROI back to the customer when there is a small gap or, depending on the size of the gap between services and technology. Can you talk about that a little bit more and sort of expand on if you were seeing across the sector overall? Is it that a services team is really good at using certain tech platforms, or that the client is? How can you talk a little bit more about that nuance in your research in the broader sector in that area, so our audience sort of knows what to look for when we're talking about a small gap or a large gap?
Yeah, I think what's true pretty across the board is technology is only as strong as the person using it, right? Technology is a tool, not always a solution. So I think that, if you've got someone in-house that has all the industry knowledge and that is really, quick with software, then great. The reality is, though, not many folks have that. So I think, when you can bring in, that team of experts who knows their own platform really well, knows all its capabilities, how to leverage those to their fullest extent, but also knows, how to steer the ship, but also what direction they're going in, right? I think that's really important too. I mean, you can be awesome with tech, but if you don't know kind of where you're headed or what you even need to be doing, then that doesn't have as much value. And at the end of the day, that's what we talk about always at Nucleus, is that at the end of the day, ROI is king. You want to know that the software you're investing in is going to be worth that investment. And, we always say too, like the ROI of an unused platform is always 0, right? So it's got to be usable, it's got to be easy. So if you have a team of folks that, that can bridge the gap between the technology itself, but also how to use it, ROI is going to be better in 99.99% of cases.
Very interesting.
I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, it certainly does, because there's so many different ways, I think, that either you can feel like you want to just rely on the technology, but you might not be getting everything out of it. We have another question that came in that I think speaks to this quite directly. The question is, how do you measure the impact of your changes that your foundation makes? Big question, right?
Yeah.
The industry overall is always wants to do this, right? This is the main goal. Tanya, do you want to start with this one a bit and we can all follow up then?
Sure. I mean, this is a very, very hot topic issue year after year. And, foundations can approach this different ways. The most common way, of course, is reach back out to your grantees. You can put together some sort of a report, right? That you can monitor the grants that way. And that report does not have to be this cumbersome, robust report, and you could even build that into, if you have a grant proposal that you're asking your grantees, you can even build that into your grant proposals. How are you planning on measuring success? And then you can check back in with them, after a certain period of time to see how if they did what they said they were going to do. And then, of course, can help you decide, okay, did we make the impact that we want to make here? What can we do differently? So that's one approach. That's a very common approach. And going back to technology solutions, that's something that's really nice when it's built into some kind of platform, because it can completely help you streamline that process. So you're not dealing with any kind of, paper report, for example.
It's very interesting that you bring that up, both the way to measure impact from the foundation side of things and from the nonprofit side of things. When you brought up technology, it made me think how in our platform and in many different platforms, there's sort of impact measurement, so that as the funds are going out, you can see which bucket they might go in towards a foundation's goal. And then also, of course, leaving that space for the nonprofit to provide feedback as well in terms of how they're doing or how their grant went, without, feeling that sort of penalization, right? Because something we talk about a lot as well. One of the things that I noticed in having been in the sector a little bit, but that's built into our technology, is when somebody submits a request for a grant to be made, right? So this would be a trustee, not necessarily an application. Remember, it's not a DAF, but it's the same kind of idea where pressing a button and they say, I want to give to this foundation. The default goes to a general operating support. And then it is an additional touch for, let's say, one of our clients or anyone who's using one of our technology to then say, no, we actually want it to be programmatic, and this is why, and you put in the very specific directions. And I think that extra thought towards it, I know for myself and the folks that I work with who are donors and have talked to, thinking about, wait, does it have to be programmatic? Do I just want it to be general operating support? Is this somebody that I've built a relationship with, and we want them to have the freedom to spend the money as they need it, whether it's perhaps for a specific program, or if things happen to change very suddenly and they need to allocate it in a different place that they see that it's best. So we have a question in here, and I'm going to go ahead and read through. It says, do you have any suggestions with regard to making appointments to a foundation board after the founding members have passed away? Self-appointed boards, boards appointed by a third party, or other.
Yeah. I could probably weigh in on that one. And I think somebody else may have answered this member as well. But yeah, I would definitely start with your foundation's bylaws. I'm not sure if you mean if there's no more, like there's no living board members. Hopefully there's still a board member around to appoint the other ones, but that if there isn't, your bylaws should be able to direct you on what to do next. If it's going to be the executor of estate, for example, that's going to go to that last living board member to try to see if they're going to be able to keep this foundation going, or if there was a successor directors potentially nominated, that you can go to them. But definitely I would start with the bylaws. Usually that your bylaws will help inform that process. If I'm understanding the question correctly, that is.
Thank you. It's very helpful. Switching gears a little bit on the trend side of things, a question that was submitted as part of the pre-webinar questions was the role of AI in partnership and in the sector. So Cameron, in general, in your research, how frequently are you actually seeing the implementation of AI when it comes to platforms and services platforms, or is this something still that is being talked about a lot, but
it's being
maybe
talked
future
about a
use?
lot more than it's being acted on, for sure. I think a lot of folks are, there's some early adoption of it. Generally, it's like the massive companies that have all like the data protections in place, because the last thing you want to have happen is for your AI tool to start riffing and provide inaccurate information, because those two things, right? It upsets customers and it causes more work for your team, right? So generally, I haven't seen it really take off just yet. Ask me again in 6 months, I'm sure my answer would be different. But to be honest, no, I think there's a ton of buzz around it, but it's just kind of that buzz. It hasn't really hasn't taken hold yet as much as like the marketing for the AI providers would like you to think it has.
It's an excellent point. Tanya, have you seen it at all, or folks requesting to use it in any format?
Not through me, perhaps some of my other colleagues, but I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, actually,
Curious.
I think yeah, a quick I guess anecdote to that is internally, yes. So you can use AI to maybe summarize your meeting minutes. It'll give you like a transcript of everything you talked about. Like maybe give you, hey, you talked about X, Y, and Z with this person. Maybe here are the next best steps you should take based on your conversation. So I think internally I've seen it used a bunch, but like externally or like customer facing or like applicant facing, not quite there yet.
Still that human touch point, which I think is a relief to everybody. We wouldn't want, instead of being able to pick up the phone and talk to Tanya right away, to have face to face with an AI first.
Yeah. Yeah. I would also probably caution people from doing that. While you might be able to glean some general information, you really would need to be very specific with your prompts, would not substitute that as, working with actual experts, right? Whether it's outside counsel or a company like Foundation Source, et cetera, et cetera. So
that's interesting. We see so many people, at Foundation Source who for their first time are welcoming in an outside provider into their family philanthropic giving. And I think that, knowing that it's not just a platform or just a corporation or things like that, that it's a person that you're working with one-on-one is something across the board for all of the different kinds of providers and all of the philanthropy supporting organizations, that they're together moving the family's goals forward.
absolutely.
Tanya, I'm going to go ahead and just end with you. And one final question that has come through here. We can think about it a little bit. But in terms of family or people who have not worked with somebody from the outside yet, and they are just starting this relationship and just starting to get to know somebody, what do you think sort of in that first meeting when they talk to you, what is it that they could expect? Should they be prepared for when discussing their philanthropy with somebody from the outside for the first time?
Oh gosh. Again, it really is going to depend where they are in the stage of their philanthropy. If it's a newly created foundation, then some of those conversations that we're probably going to be having, assuming that they're new to the whole world of philanthropy in general, is just really understanding, what it is that they have and what are the things that they have to do and how they're going to approach doing those things. But if they've been in existence for a little bit longer, then those conversations that we're going to be having with them is we're really going to be taking the time to really get to know them. What is the most important priorities for you that we need to support you with, making a timeline for that. And really just getting to build that relationship and know them so we know how to support them. Because again, it's just going to be so different from foundation to foundation, what's top of mind to them. But it's really just having a lot of open dialogue and getting to know each other, and them being open about, as far as like what their expectations are and communicating their needs to us so that we know how to leverage the right resources for them and meet those deliverables.
I think that's so helpful to know, and for them to have that expectation that they are in expert hands and they'll move through the process. With that, we are just about at time, and so I want to make sure to leave some space for our audience to be able to see some of the tips that we're going to leave them with, including exploring your true potential to affect change, talking with your partners and vendors to achieve your goals, and also keeping in mind that you're controlled, right? To make sure that compliance issues don't sneak up on you. So thank you very much, Cameron and Tanya. Thank you very much, Exponent Philanthropy, for having us today. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Alexis, and thank you, Cameron and Tanya and Foundation Source for your partnership on this webinar. To our participants, I will be sending a follow-up email with a link to this recording and the slides shared, as well as other resources related to the topic. I do want to say there was a lot of conversation around succession planning, and that's a whole big topic. So I put in the chat a link to some more resources for those who are interested in diving into succession planning. But thank you all for joining today, and I'm happy to give everyone 15 minutes at the end of the hour back to their day, and we will end it there. Have a good afternoon.